What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast, the ultimate sports history pod brought to you by Sideline Sports. I'm your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by my good friend and fellow host, Salman Huck. What's up, man? How you doing?
Yo, what's going on, man?
Not much, man. I'm ready to dive in. So today we are doing a redraft of the top 16 picks in the 2004 NFL Draft. So this was a dramatic draft with a couple guys holding out at the top, some interesting selections, a lot of Pro Bowlers, a lot of future Hall of Famers came up through this draft. So it's been a lot of fun digging in and looking through the draft results. So the format we're going to be doing is we'll both be making the picks. So we'll announce the actual pick that was made in real life, and then Salman and I will take turns essentially saying who we would have drafted instead, or maybe we would have kept the same draft, but we'll see. And then, of course, we'll talk about some honorable mentions, and then we will discuss some of the guys that did not survive the redraft and why that might have been. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first overall pick. So another thing is, obviously, some of these picks have been traded, but we'll go with basically who actually made the selection. So, for example, with the first overall pick, the San Diego Chargers selected quarterback Eli Manning out of Ole Miss. So, Salman, who would you have picked with the first overall pick?
I actually would have taken the guy they ended up trading for, which was Phillip Rivers. Eli didn't want to play for the Chargers, and they ended up trading for Rivers anyways. So I felt Rivers had a pretty great career with the Chargers. You know, he's an 8-time Pro Bowler. He led the NFL in passing touchdowns and passer ratings a few years, things like that. Almost won an MVP award one year. So I thought he was just a good fit for the Chargers. You could have made the case for Big Ben here too. But, given how Rivers' career played out in San Diego, I thought it was a good fit and might as well just draft him with the number one pick when they ended up trading for him anyways.
Yeah, and they basically got, the Giants, they got a few, or the Chargers were able to get Phillip Rivers along with a couple picks in exchange for Eli Manning. So I went in a slightly different direction. I think this is basically a difference in maybe philosophy and what you really want from a quarterback. But I went with Ben Roethlisberger first overall. So it's actually kind of spooky how close they are in all the major stats. So if you look at their completions between him and Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger has more completions, more yards, but only by a little bit, maybe about by 600 yards. Their touchdowns are within 3 of each other. 418 for Ben Roethlisberger, 421 for Rivers, and their interceptions are also really close. So 211 for Roethlisberger and 209 for Rivers. I think what really sets Roethlisberger apart is that second rushing element to his game, where he rushed for 1,300 yards in his career and 20 touchdowns compared to 600 yards for Rivers and 3 touchdowns. So
I'm surprised. I'm surprised Big Ben had that many rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how big he was and how many times they probably ran QB sneaks, similar to with Brady when he was there in New England. They don't do it so much anymore in Tampa, but and of course all those plays, those insane plays that Roethlisberger would make, just scrambling around for like 10, 15 seconds and then launching it upfield to Antonio Brown, Martavis Bryant, whoever it was, And I think what sets Roethlisberger apart is he made the careers of a lot of these really great wide receivers. And I don't know if there is a single really great receiver that is tied to Phillip Rivers. Maybe Antonio Gates, but I mean, obviously he's a tight end, not a receiver. So it's just, it's really interesting that the difference is there. But so I think it just comes down to philosophy basically and who you preferred between Rivers and Roethlisberger.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And what's kind of surprising to me is that neither one of them were they didn't make any all-pro teams, but that's what happens when you play in the same conference as Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, so you're probably not making any all-pro teams, but they probably were in consideration a few times.
Exactly. So I mean, the all-pros are not by conference. The all-pros are just, I think, first and second team, but again, you're just the names you're competing with: Brady, Manning,
Yeah.
Rodgers, Breeze,
Drew Brees. Yeah, exactly.
guys
So a
that
lot of
are,
competition.
yeah, exactly. And then at the tail end of their career, some of the young guns that came around. But they did both make a ton of Pro Bowls. And of course, Roethlisberger won the 2 Super Bowls compared to Rivers, none. So,
Yep.
yeah, anyway. So with the second overall pick, the then Oakland Raiders selected, unfortunately, tackle Robert Gallery out of Iowa. So this was one of the all-time draft misses in NFL history. They drafted a guy who was not good enough to play offensive tackle at the NFL level. He ended up having a pretty decent career as a guard, but you don't draft a guard second overall, maybe unless it's Quentin Nelson or something like that. But the guy I had them picking, so I did consider Phillip Rivers here, but the thought of longtime Charger Phillip Rivers in a Raiders jersey made me like physically ill. So I just couldn't do it, man. I really thought about it. But then I also thought about how I always considered Phillip Rivers like an empty calories guy, like good stats, bad team dude who just put up a ton of numbers. But when like the chips were down, I always thought that he would come up with a big interception or something that swung the game in the other team's favor. I'm sure he has a ton of game-winning drives and comebacks and all that stuff. But to me, I just couldn't imagine him in a Raiders jersey. So, all that being said, I took Eli Manning. So, yeah. I mean, Eli Manning, he doesn't have the same raw statistical numbers. He's not super far behind these other dudes in terms of yards and touchdowns and all that. But, the guy just has grit, and he won 2 Super Bowls. And, yeah, so Eli Manning would have been my pick here for the Raiders. So who did you have the Raiders taking?
Yeah, I went, same thought process kind of. They needed a quarterback. I think Kerry Collins was their QB at this time, so clearly they could have used a quarterback. Kerry Collins was decent, and then, this probably prevents them from taking Jamarcus Russell down the road, so good pick in Eli. I went Ben Roethlisberger here. I think he would have brought all that stuff to the Raiders, and, they would have maybe, when they trade for Randy Moss, they have a quarterback that can actually throw to him, so he was rookie of the year that year too, offensive rookie of the year. So Big Ben would have given the Raiders a quarterback and, a franchise quarterback for a long time to come.
Yeah, big arm, big strong dude, very Al Davis type of quarterback.
Exactly.
Which Eli Manning was too. I mean, he couldn't run like Ben did, but he was also a big strong guy. And the Raiders went into this season starting Rich Gannon, who I think was 38 or 39 at the time, and they had signed Kerry Collins to a 3-year deal for like $15 million. So it wasn't like he was signed basically to be the backup. Ended up being the starter for a couple years before losing his job. So yeah, taking Eli here would have definitely saved them a ton of heartache over the years. I don't know if Eli is a franchise changing type dude, but he's at the very least a very good to sometimes great quarterback, depending on the situation. And
Yep.
I think he could have changed the hopes of this franchise for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. So the third overall pick, the Arizona Cardinals selected future Hall of Famer, wide receiver Larry Fitzgerald out of Pittsburgh. So who did you have the Cardinals using the third overall pick on?
I went Eli Manning here. I know I could have made the case for them to just keep Larry Fitzgerald given his, career, but clearly they needed a quarterback. I mean, I think they had Sean King and Josh McCown as their quarterbacks, so those guys were not the answers. And, Fitzgerald felt more of a luxury pick at this point in time, given they have Anquan Bolden and these type of guys. So, obviously, like you said, right, Eli is not, statistically there with Rivers and Roethlisberger, but he's a good quarterback, 2-time Super Bowl champ, 2-time Super Bowl MVP, 4-time Pro Bowler. And so you put Eli on the Cardinals and, maybe they have an extended, Super Bowl window here. They drafted pretty well in this draft. So, and they built a pretty nasty defense off this draft. So, put Eli in that situation. Maybe they find another Larry Fitzgerald type of wide receiver in the next year, things like that. But they definitely would have had a Super Bowl window open for them with Eli Manning.
Absolutely, yeah. And you mentioned Josh McCown and Sean King. I think Josh McCown was drafted a year or two prior as a third round pick, so it wasn't like he was a top 5 pick that they were married to and had to start. And he was also not like a 6th or 7th round pick that you could easily discard. So they were kind of caught in the middle. So it does make sense to go receiver, and obviously he had an incredible career with them. But quarterback is the most important position in the NFL. So I went with the 3rd best quarterback, in my opinion, in this draft, and that is Phillip Rivers. So, he ends up in San Diego. He backs up Drew Brees for a bit before taking over and ultimately has a great statistical career. He has a couple big playoff moments. I think they went into Indianapolis and beat Peyton Manning and the Colts with that Michael Turner season. So he was very good. I don't think I would ever have considered him a great quarterback, but statistically he was great. But I don't think, as I said when we talked about in the previous pick, I don't think he's a winning quarterback. But yeah,
how much of that is a little bit of Raider? How much of that is Raider bias?
I mean, is it Raider bias, or is it just what the guy does? Like, he just, I don't know. I mean, he throws a ton of yards. He throws a ton of intersections.
Numbers.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. I mean, we don't know how his career plays out if he goes to like the Cardinals or somewhere else. But yeah, it's not. Yeah, I think we basically went with our first 3 picks. We went quarterbacks, just flipped the order of them.
Basically, yeah. I mean, they're the 3 best, not 3 best players in this draft, but 3 most important players. So with the 4th overall pick, the New York Giants selected quarterback Phillip Rivers out of NC State, and of course traded him and a few other picks to the Chargers in exchange for Eli Manning. So both of these guys, at least in my world, well, both of our worlds, sorry, Rivers is off the board. So who did you have the Giants picking instead?
I went Jason Peters, who was undrafted but ended up being, a cornerstone franchise-changing left tackle. And so obviously the Giants wanted Eli, and they had Kurt Warner here at the time, and it just felt like, okay, with Eli off the board or any quarterback off the board here, that Jason Peters would have given them a left tackle for the next decade plus. And he's a 6-time All-Pro, 2 times first team and 4 times second team, and then he's a 9-time Pro Bowler. He's a member of the 2010 All-Decade team. So obviously he's a very valuable guy, and it's crazy to me that
he's still playing
here. And he's still playing. It's insane.
He's got to be. Is he the only active guy remaining from this draft? Maybe a punter.
I believe
or kicker?
So. I believe so. I believe Jason Peters might be the only active guy left here from this draft.
I think Andy Lee is still chugging along somewhere. I think he's in Jacksonville.
Yep, Andy Lee somewhere.
But he's a punter. That doesn't count.
Yeah. We don't count punters or kickers.
They're both 40. They're both still playing, but vastly different positions for sure.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I went Jason Peters. I thought he'd be a good fit there, and he's a cornerstone left tackle.
That makes perfect sense. I have him very close, but I could not let Larry Fitzgerald sit on this board any longer. He is by far the best wide receiver in the horrendous wide receiver class. It's kind of embarrassing how bad this class is.
It's very embarrassing actually.
And when you look at the guy's resume, it is kind of incredible that he's not brought up more in the greatest wide receiver conversation. People talk about the obvious GOAT, Jerry Rice, and then people say, well, Randy Moss doesn't have the raw stats that Jerry Rice does in longevity, but, if you can give me one season of a wide receiver, I would take Randy or Calvin Johnson over Jerry Rice. Whatever that, I don't know how you feel about that. Obviously, you're a Niners fan, so I know you probably don't like that, but there's a conversation to be had. But
yeah,
Larry Fitzgerald is second all-time in receiving yards, second all-time in catches, and is 6th in touchdowns. So it's not like he is, 5th or 4th or even 3rd. He's second, right behind Jerry Rice. He has longevity. He has the big moments. The only thing that's missing from him is a Super Bowl, and part of that is just having to play in Arizona, where they struggle to have great quarterback play. And he is like, what was it, like a toe tap? Was it Santonio Holmes? A toe tap from Santonio Holmes away from winning a Super Bowl.
He was.
So, yeah, I could not let Larry Fitzgerald sit. And for the Giants, I mean, they obviously drafted Eli Manning, or they got Eli Manning in this draft. They had Kurt Warner, so it would have united Kurt Warner with him. I know Kurt Warner had like a weird mid-career slump in this period before he went to Arizona, but maybe having Fitzgerald revitalizes him, and he's only like 33 at the time, so maybe he's good for the Giants for a few years. I don't know, but yeah,
Yeah.
I couldn't let him sit longer.
Yeah, no, I could definitely see that. Obviously, I considered it, but I felt Jason Peters was maybe a little bit better fit. But you can't go wrong with Larry Fitzgerald either over here. And I agree with you. He's definitely in the conversation of top 3, top 4 wide receivers of all time.
Yeah, 2 Hall of Famers. So Peters for you, Fitz for me. Not bad. I'll take it.
Yep.
All right. So 5th overall, the then Washington Redskins, aka Commanders, aka Washington Football Team, selected safety Sean Taylor out of Miami. So I know that his career was cut short tragically. I think he was killed during a home invasion in Miami either during the off season or during mid season. I don't recall exactly when, but I had Washington sticking with this pick. I mean, the guy's a franchise legend. He was well on his way to being a Hall of Famer. You just hope that perhaps in this alternate universe, his career doesn't end tragically. But I think you can't mess with this pick. It's just too good of a selection, and he was just too good of a player to pass up here.
Yeah, I 100% agree. He definitely, Sean Taylor was a beast when he was playing, and like you said, he was probably going to be a Hall of Famer and be one of the greatest safeties of all time, and all that stuff. So yeah, not a bad pick at all, and staying with that pick.
Cool. Yeah.
But
who did you have Washington take?
yeah, this is where I ended up going Larry Fitzgerald. Could have let Larry Fitzgerald slide out of the top 5 for sure. I think the then Redskins are starting Rod Gardner and Lavernius Coles at wide receiver. So obviously Larry Fitzgerald's clear upgrade for them at the wide receiver position. He's a franchise staple for the next 10 years, plus. And like you said, right, Larry Fitzgerald has all these accolades. He's a 3-time All-Pro, 11-time Pro Bowler. He's a member of the All-Decade team. He's a member of the 100th anniversary All-Time team. He's led the NFL in receiving touchdowns and receptions multiple times. So, just a clear upgrade for them. Maybe it doesn't help that he's playing with Mark Brunell early in his career, but eventually he'll probably link up with RG3, and you can only imagine how much chemistry those two would have had, and how the Redskins would have been set up for success there. But yeah, I think the Sean Taylor pick was also pretty solid as well.
I would feel bad for Larry if he ends up in Washington. He would have suffered a similar fate with his quarterback play. They had Mark Brunell, Patrick Ramsey.
He was playing with Sean King for a while, so
I know.
At some point they would have upgraded.
It's a similar fate. That's all I'm saying is,
Yep.
And then he would have got Jason Campbell at one point. Again, if we're keeping things consistent with our fake world, and then RG3, and then now, well, he wouldn't be in the year in the NFL anymore, but he would have played with Kirk Cousins as well. So yeah, not a great bunch of quarterbacks, but I think he was actually better in Arizona. He got to play with Kurt Warner, Carson Palmer. Yeah. I think he had a year with Kyler Murray. So
yep.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of a mixed bag here. But at least he went to the Super Bowl in Arizona. I don't know if he goes to the Super Bowl in Washington.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Well, with the 6th overall pick, the Cleveland Browns selected tight end Kellen Winslow out of the University of Miami. So who did you have the Browns picking 6th overall?
I went Jared Allen. So obviously, he's a great pass rusher, and Browns needed help on all sides of the ball, and the D-line was particularly weak. I think they were starting guys like Kennard Lang, and I was like, who the hell is Kennard Lang? And Ebenezer Ekubon. Yeah, great names, but I don't know who they were. And Allen, he would have been a leader in this locker room, and he's a beast of a player. I think he has 136 sacks in his playing career. He's a 4-time All-Pro, 5-time Pro Bowler. He led the NFL in sacks twice during his career. And I didn't know this about Jared Allen, but he's apparently from Los Gatos or thereabouts. So he's from the
Bay Area guy.
Native California. Yeah, he's a Bay Area guy. So yeah, so I think he would have instantly improved the Browns D line, and he was taken in the 4th round of this draft, and a big jump for him here.
Yeah, I actually had them making the same selection. the question about Jared Allen is like, I wonder, is he the most underrated pass rusher of all time? Like, you
I
think
yeah.
about,
Yeah, I think he might
yeah.
be. He might be.
I mean, part of it was, I mean, he came out strong, but he had 9 sacks his rookie year, so it's not like he had, uh, a long incubation period or whatever. It's not like he was buried on the bench or anything, but he just, maybe because he was kind of goofy. He had like a goofy demeanor about him with the handlebar stash, and he's had a mullet and did all kinds of weird stuff. He had the celebration where he was like roping the calf. So there, and his number is 69, which is always kind of a joke number. Like
Yep. Yeah.
nobody wanted that number in high school because it was all, it's all a joke. But the guy has an insane resume. I mean, you kind of mentioned 136 sacks as like offhand, but he is, depending on if you go by the official or unofficial listing, he has either the 12th or 16th most sacks all time. And this is a guy
impressive.
that, yeah, I mean, he's not thought of when you talk about some of the great pass rushers, but he was a first-team All-Pro 4 times,
Yeah.
which is, again, is incredible. I think he leads this class, actually, with the most first-team All-Pro selections, which, as we talked about, is a class that includes Larry Fitzgerald, Jason Peters, Phillip Rivers, Ben Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, like some Hall of Fame dudes. And Jared Allen, of all people, has the most All-Pro selections. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy to think about. But, yeah, I guess we're aligned on this pick. It just makes sense.
Yep.
All right. So, with the 7th overall pick, the Detroit Lions selected wide receiver Roy Williams out of Texas, so not the safety that went to the Cowboys. And I had them going with Jason Peters. So I think you mentioned, but the coolest thing about Jason Peters is that he was a tight end in college. He was a big tight end. If you look at the pictures, he definitely does not look like a tight end. But he was undrafted. He was a tight end in college, and he ends up being one of the best left tackles of the past 20 years or so. Still active, as we mentioned. And the Lions, of course, were one of the worst teams in the league consistently. They were starting Joey Harrington, who was also a top pick. That didn't work out. But, when you have a chance to add a 10, 15-year left tackle, you don't miss that chance. So that's why I had them going with Jason Peters. So he's off your board at this point. So who did you have them taking instead?
Yeah, I really like that Jason Peters pick, and if he was here for me, I would have made that pick here. But I went Sean Taylor here. Obviously he was a talented guy, hell of a safety, and the Lions had a need there, and he would have he would have been a Hall of Famer, and he would have completely changed that Lions defense, and maybe on a different team, different circumstances, that stuff doesn't happen to him, and he doesn't pass away. So I think definitely. He was one heck of a talent, and couldn't let him slide too far in this draft.
Yeah, I'm sure if he lived in Detroit, he probably wouldn't be going to Miami quite as often. So
there you go. There you go.
But no need to get too much into that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Unfortunate circumstances. May he rest in peace. So we'll move on to the 8th overall pick. The Atlanta Falcons selected cornerback D'Angelo Hall out of Virginia Tech. So who did you have the Falcons picking here?
I went Vince Wilfork. Obviously you could have made a case for D'Angelo Hall. They didn't have any corners, but you can't pass up a defensive talent like Wilfork. He was a 4-time All-Pro, 2-time Super Bowl champ, 5-time Pro Bowler. He was just a steady presence as a defensive tackle, and he would anchor that line for years. It's just, I think, he's just so talented, and you couldn't let him drop here. And I think he was a first round pick. He went pick 21 here in this draft, but, big jump for him here. But I think, you get a guy like him, and he anchors that line for many years to come. And, your defensive line is kind of set with a guy like that.
Yeah, he's not, he's not an undrafted guy or anything. So a nice little jump, but he was still, a big time player in college. So I actually had them making that pick as well. I did consider keeping D'Angelo Hall here, but you can't pass up another possible future Hall of Famer. I don't know. It's kind of dicey, but the guy has the resume. Like you said, All Pro, multiple times Super Bowl champ. One of the all-time like cool personalities in the NFL. Just a really fun guy. I remember that. I think it was Hard Knocks where he came out like in the cowboy boots and the overalls.
Yes. I remember that.
Yeah, he just seemed like a good locker room guy. Yeah, I really liked him. A great player. But yeah, so we're aligned here. I think that's what, 2 in a row? No, not 2 in a row, but a couple that we've aligned on in here.
2 picks we've been aligned on so far.
Yeah, not bad. All right. So with the 9th overall pick, this might be the worst pick of the litter. The Jacksonville Jaguars selected wide receiver Reggie Williams out of Washington. Reggie Williams did not do much of anything in the NFL, unfortunately. He just kind of busted out. So I had them picking the second best receiver in this class, who coincidentally enough was not drafted. So I had them taking Wes Welker. So Wes Welker was undrafted. I think he went to San Diego first, mostly returned kicks and punts, did the same thing in Miami, and then he was kind of unlocked when he went to New England and then Denver later in his career. But he ended up with 900 catches, close to 10,000 yards, 50 touchdowns. So just really impressive numbers for a guy, once again, that was not drafted. And you look at the second best receiver in this class was Jericho Cotchery, drafted, I should say, with 500 catches, 6,000 yards. So quite a bit more than that guy. So yeah, I had the Jaguars taking Wes Welker. So who did you have the Jaguars taking?
I like that pick of Wes Welker. I didn't think about putting him here, but I felt like he was more of a guy that succeeded because he had Tom Brady and those kind of guys, and then eventually that success followed him to Denver. But yeah, I didn't have him here.
Manning.
I went.
He played with Peyton Manning in Denver too. So
yes, that's true. That's fair.
That's
but.
I mean, numbers are numbers, regardless. So
no. I mean, he put up great numbers for a guy who went undrafted. So I went in a different direction here. I went Carlos Dansby, the linebacker. Jaguars needed a linebacker, and I think in the second round of this draft, they ended up taking a guy named Darryl Smith. But I feel like Dansby would have been a great fit for them. He had over 1,000 solo career tackles and 43 career sacks. He was a one-time All-Pro. And so just a very good, solid linebacker, and, upgrades the Jaguars defense there. And, as it's clear the Jaguars needed help everywhere and anywhere they could get it. And Dansby would have been a upgrade there for them at linebacker. And I think he went in the second round, pick 33 in this draft. So a little jump for him as well.
Yeah, I had him going a little bit later. So yeah, I think we agree that he is worthy of a top 16 pick. Just a great player. And I'll expand more on my thoughts on him when he comes up in my selection. But all right. So with the 10th overall pick, the Houston Texans selected cornerback Dunta Robinson out of South Carolina. So who did you have the Texans picking here?
I went Steven Jackson. It was pretty clear the Texans needed a running back. I mean, they were starting some guy named Dominic Williams, who I don't even remember what he did for them, but Steven Jackson was a much better running back than that. I know it's a little high for a running back, but for the Texans, I think they definitely needed to go get one and kind of relieve the pressure off David Carr. Steven Jackson's a 2-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler. He's rushed for over 11,000 yards and has 69 rushing touchdowns. And so I think having a guy like that in the backfield takes some pressure off Carr, and he's not dropping back as much and getting sacked as much and things like that. And the Texans have a little bit more of a balanced offense. And and Steven Jackson's kind of the guy to give it to him, and so in that regard, it's worth the top 10 pick here in my mind.
Yeah, and this is a different era of football, right? We're not talking about 2021, 22, whatever. Like this is 20 years ago almost. So running backs were definitely higher valued back then for good reason, because that's just how the game was played. And that being said, I also had them picking Steven Jackson. You could have probably picked a ton of other players on this list because the Texans they were okay this year, but of course they fell off shortly after, and they just were not very good for a long time. So Steven Jackson was one of the most underrated players, I think, of this era. He had, I want to say, I think 10 seasons in a row of 1,000+ yards, or was that eight seasons from 05 to 2012? So 8 seasons of over 1,000 yards. He had a 1,500-yard season, a 1,400-yard season. Just an incredible player for a long time. I mean, then he, once he hit 30, he fell off, just like a lot of the great running backs do. So not too surprising there. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned Dominic Williams. I did not remember who that was either. So I was like,
Yeah, I mean, I was like, and that was their starting running back, and you're like, seriously? Like, no wonder David Carr was like dropping back 45 times a game.
But you know what? The funny thing is, he had, I think, 2 or 3 1,000-yard seasons in a row, and then he
really?
blew his knee out.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. I was like, what? No way. But he only played from 03 to 05. Okay. He was a 4th-round pick. He had 1,000 yards, 1,100 yards, and then 900 yards in 11 games his last year. But he blew out his knee. I know, he was really good, apparently. But yeah, he blew out his knee, and then he was never heard from again. So with Steven Jackson, you get longevity, you get durability. He played in at least 12 games for the first 11 years of his career. So he was durable, steady, and I mentioned everything about his impressive achievements with his rushing yards and all that. So yeah, I think we agree that would have been a good pick for the Texans. So okay. With the 11th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers selected quarterback Ben Roethlisberger out of Miami of Ohio University, so small little MAC school in the middle of Ohio. So he is off the board for both of us. So I ended up with the 4th best quarterback in this draft, which is Matt Schaub. So I think we're aligned on this pick. But
yes, we are. That's 4 out of 4 picks we're aligned on.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Schaub had an interesting career. He was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round by the Atlanta Falcons, I guess, to back up Michael Vick, and he did basically that. He just backed him up for a few years, played a couple games here and there. And then he went to Houston, where he ended up being, one of the, I don't want to say great quarterbacks in the NFL, one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, I think he led the NFL in passing yards in 2009. So,
and that was coincidentally one of his 2 Pro Bowl seasons. But, he had a solid touchdown interception ratio, 136 touchdowns, 90 interceptions, nothing crazy. But he did have 3 seasons of over 4,000 yards, and I think the Steelers probably still win the Super Bowl that first year. Because
yeah. I
Ben
think so.
Roethlisberger was awful. They just needed somebody to throw for 150 yards a game, turn around, hand the ball off to Jerome Bettis and kind of get out of the way. It was Jerome Bettis, and I think Willie Parker was on that team.
Yes, it was Willie Parker at the backup.
Yeah, so I think
I think with the Matt Schaub, you surround him with some of those weapons in Pittsburgh. He gets like Plaxico Burress, Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant, Antoine Randall L. So he gets weapons, and he probably has a pretty decent career.
Yeah,
which he already did.
Yeah, he had a solid career. I don't think he stays in Pittsburgh for 20 years like Roethlisberger did, but he at least does have a good career, because as we know, he's a good quarterback, good to decent quarterback. So nothing crazy here, but I think he deserves this selection for a team that really needed a quarterback. All right. So with the 12th overall pick, the New York Jets selected linebacker Jonathan Vilma out of Miami. So the real Miami, and that's 3 Miami Hurricanes in the top 16. So who did you have the Jets picking here?
I had them still going linebacker. I went Daryl Smith. I didn't think Wilma was a bad pick here, but I felt like Daryl Smith was just slightly more productive than Jonathan Wilma. So he had about 764 solo tackles, 30.5 sacks. And so overall, just a solid linebacker, and would have been a good contributor to the Jets defense here. But I think Daryl Smith was just slightly better than Jonathan Wilma, and that's the guy I gave the Jets.
Yeah, I liked Jonathan Vilma a lot. He was a good leader, good player for them. He also, I think, played really well with the Saints. So a good pick, but I had them going also with a linebacker, but more of a outside edge rushing linebacker in Sean Phillips, who was selected by the San Diego Chargers later in this draft. But I thought that Phillips's pass rushing ability really separated him. He is second in this class with 81.5 sacks in 168 games. So, 1, 2, 3 quick maths, that's almost a sack every other game. So, or a half sack every game, depending on how you look at it.
That's impressive.
It is, right? And, he's one of those guys that I think got kind of lost in the shuffle. He played next to Sean Merriman for a while. So, of course, Sean Merriman's taken all the spotlight. And then he goes to Denver in 2013, has 10 sacks. I think he's playing with Von Miller at that time. So he's never the headline-grabbing guy, but he does have 3 seasons of double-digit sacks, and he's just like a steady sack artist, right? 7 sacks, 8 sacks, 8.5, 7, 9, whatever it is. So I thought he was good, and this was an era of Jets football where they were competitive. They were making runs with Chad Pennington and those guys. So I think he would have added a good pass rushing element to this team. So, yeah.
I like it. Yeah. Nice pick.
All right. So, next up, the Buffalo Bills with the 13th overall pick selected wide receiver Lee Evans out of Wisconsin. I liked Lee Evans, but not this much. So I had them picking Carlos Dansby. So you had him going, I believe, 9th to the Jaguars. So I had him, a few spots later. He was always really good. I don't want to say he was ever great. Maybe a few times, but he was never a Pro Bowler. But he was a really steady presence for Arizona, for Miami. I believe he played in Cincinnati as well. Just one of those guys where, you're confident if he's your starting middle linebacker. You're not super excited. I mean, he's not Ray Lewis or London Fletcher or something like that, but he's really good. He's versatile, which makes him, stand out among the crowd. He had the 1,000 tackles that you mentioned, so he is by far the tackle leader by almost 300 tackles in this draft. But he also had 43 career sacks and 20 interceptions. So I don't know how many guys in NFL history have done that, but I don't think it's a very long list. So maybe I should check that sometime. But yeah, I really like Carlos Dansby as a player. So who did you have the Bills taking since Dansby's off the board?
I went with Chris Nee, who was an offensive lineman. I believe he played the guard position. And so obviously the Bills could have gone wide receiver. So I did maybe possibly consider Wes Welker here. But, this guy was clearly the second best lineman in this draft. He's a 3-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler. And he would have just given the Bills, just instant stability at the guard positions and just made life easier for the offense on that side of the ball. And so I thought, when you have a chance to grab a pretty good, solid guard who can just come in and play either position, you go ahead and draft that guard, and Chris Nee was the guy.
I think he was the best offensive lineman in this draft, which was not a strong offensive line draft. So I have him coming up later, but
okay.
So spoiler alert. All right. Next up, we're getting down to the bottom here. The Chicago Bears with the 14th overall pick selected defensive tackle Tommy Harris out of Oklahoma. So who did you have the Bears picking here?
I still went defensive tackle, but I went Darnell Dockett, who, I think was slightly more productive than Tommy Harris. Again, not a bad pick here, but, Darnell Dockett, he was a 1-time All-Pro, 3-time Pro Bowler. He had like 40.5 sacks over his 10-year career and over 200 tackles, so which is pretty solid numbers for a defensive tackle. And so, I think he just slightly better player than Tommy Harris, and clearly the Bears needed that guy in the middle, and Darnell Dockett would have been that guy for them. And Darnell Dockett was taken in the 3rd round, pick 64 here, so another big jump for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like Tommy Harris a lot. I think the main issue with him was he wasn't great for that long. He had a short peak in the beginning of his career where he was second team All-Pro his second year. He makes the Pro Bowl 3 years in a row, and then he kind of falls off a cliff after that. You see his sack numbers climbing. They peak at 8, and then they drop off. And he just was not the same player for some reason. He had a really short peak. At one point, I mean, he was obviously one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, but he just fell off real quick. So I actually went with Darnell Dockett as well for everything you said.
That's 5 now.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with him is that he was also like Carlos Dansby. I wouldn't say he was ever, great. He was one of the better players, one of the best players in the NFL, but I don't think he was ever, the best or anything. He did have a second-team All-Pro, as you mentioned, and 3 Pro Bowls like Tommy Harris, but funnily enough, it happened at the end of, near the end of his career rather than the beginning of his career, like Tommy Harris. So I think it just makes sense because he fills that need for this Bears team that ended up going to the Super Bowl and had a superstar defense, and I think he would have fit that bill in the same way as Tommy Harris. I think he was a slightly different type of player, but he would have been an incredible addition to that defense.
Yep.
All right. So with the 15th overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers selected wide receiver Michael Clayton out of LSU. So I told you I liked Tommy Harris. I really liked him. So I had the Bucs picking him. So again, that peak was short-lived, but I think it was good enough to basically plug him in instead of Warren Sapp. So they had just lost Warren Sapp to the Raiders, and I think Tommy Harris would have been a easy fit there. He was another pass-rushing type defensive tackle next to Anthony McFarland. So I think it just makes sense to slot him in there. So who did you have the Bucs picking?
I went D'Angelo Hall actually here. So, they could have gone in a variety of directions. They could have gone defensive tackle. They could have gone wide receiver, maybe taken a Wes Welker here. But I just thought, the pairing with Rondé Barber would have solidified their corner spots. Hall was a good cornerback, not a great cornerback. So he would have been, ideal fit to be the, second guy opposite, Rondé Barber. And, I think he holds the NFL record for most interceptions in a game with 4. And I think he did that in a single half. So he has a record like that. And he has a total of 43 career interceptions. And so, I just thought, if you can get 2 guys that are really good, you have one elite corner and one good corner, that really helps your defense out. And so I went D'Angelo Hall here.
He was really good. And I had a hard time leaving him off the list, but I did not have him in my redraft. I mean, spoiler alert. But he was one of those guys that was, as you said, he was good, just like Carlos Dansby, just like Darnell Dockett, but he was never one of the best players. He was always decent, but he did always have a ton of interceptions. Maybe that's because teams always targeted him. I don't know, but he played for a long time. He played for 15 years. He had a very short stint in Oakland where he was awful, and he ended up getting traded to Washington, where he spent the majority of his career. But his peak really was early in his career with Atlanta, and then I don't want to say he fell off, but he was steady. Nothing special for the rest of his career, except for the interceptions. Those were steady. So
yep.
Yeah, I didn't like him much.
I mean. I don't know. It was weird. If you got traded to the Raiders like circa 2008, 2009, apparently you were just gonna have the worst career of your career, right? The worst year of your career. Like Randy Moss, it happened to Randy Moss. I don't know. It was weird. It was a weird time to be a Raider at that time. I don't know why, but all these guys
I know exactly
decided
why
to suck. Yeah.
It's exact. I know. I can tell you why, and it's because of Al Davis. Unfortunately, I mean, he was at the end of his life. I think he passed away in 2011. So he was making a lot of, and he knew it. He was getting up there in age. His health was not so great. He was making a lot of really questionable decisions in terms of personnel, in terms of coaching, and he was just basically trying to take shortcuts to winning a Super Bowl. And he just, there was just something wrong with that team. They couldn't get it together. You mentioned some of these great players that played there during that span. I mean, Warren Sapp, Randy Moss, D'Angelo Hall, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of big name guys that just, because for whatever reason, maybe it was the facilities, maybe it was the coaching, because Al Davis was basically stuck in the 80s. And
Yeah, that's true.
yeah, it's just
That is true. Yep.
unfortunate.
You'll have to do
but
a Raider what if or Al Davis what if.
maybe an Al Davis what if, because we did a Raiders one.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I believe it's episode 2 or 3. But so check that out.
Yeah. Maybe
Once
maybe you
it's,
do a what if of the decisions Al Davis made later in his career.
Yeah, or just like some kind of Al Davis retrospective, because it's definitely worth talking about.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the different phases of his career, from coaching to being a GM to owning, blah blah, et cetera, and then of course the tail end where things were just not going so hot.
For sure.
But anyway, yeah, D'Angelo Hall, not a big fan. So with the last pick of the top half of the first round of the 2004 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles selected guard Shawn Andrews out of Arkansas. Who did you have the Eagles picking here?
I ended up giving them Jonathan Wilma, obviously a solid, linebacker. The Eagles, I think, were not too far off from a Super Bowl. I think the next year they go to the Super Bowl here. And this just solidifies their defense. And Wilma, he was the defensive rookie of the year this year, and he was a 3-time Pro Bowler. I think he won a Super Bowl with the Saints. And he's a solid guy. He had 600 solo tackles, 12 sacks. And so, I think playing alongside Jeremiah Trotter is just another guy that solidifies that defense and, maybe helps them shore up that Super Bowl run when they get there. So I think, yeah. I also considered Wes Welker here. I thought about it. I was like, oh, man, am I really going to drop him out of the top half? And I did. So, but yeah, definitely, I think Eagles could have gone wide receiver or linebacker, and one of those two would have definitely helped them.
Yeah, the last pick here is always tough because you're trying to squeeze in all the guys that you like.
Yeah. Yep.
So I considered Ben Watson. I considered Bob Sanders, who might be, like, in terms of pure talent, one of the best players in this draft. But I ended up going like for like. So instead of Shawn Andrews, I had them picking Chris Snee. So Shawn Andrews had a great peak. His third year, he was first team All-Pro, Pro Bowler. The second year, in 2007, he had a Pro Bowl appearance, and then he just fell off because of injury. He played 2 games in 2008, no games in 2009 because of a back injury, and then made a comeback with the Giants, but only started 7 games for them. So instead, I went with Chris Snee, who has all of the same accolades, 2 All-Pros, 4 Pro Bowls, but he played 141 games instead of 63, and basically played 16 games for 7 years in the middle of his career. So he was steady, he was durable. He still retired at 31, but you're getting twice the amount of games that they got from Shawn Andrews. So maybe on a talent level they're very similar, but just the durability edge goes to Chris Snee. So
yep, I like it.
All right, so that is it for our redraft. So our next segment is we just talk about some of the honorable mentions, some of the guys that we thought maybe deserved to make it, but of course there's only 16 picks. So who did you have as some of your honorable mentions?
Yeah, obviously Wes Welker was one. Bob Sanders, you named it. I didn't take Tommy Harris, so he's an honorable mention for me. Sean Phillips is another guy. Antonio Smith's another guy. And then a couple of linemen like Scott Wells, Nick Hardwick, Will Smith, another pass rusher. And then, I think that's a pretty comprehensive list of honorable mentions for me.
That's totally fair. And this was kind of a weird draft. I mean, I don't want to say it's talent deficient, but there wasn't that many like superstar level players.
Yeah, right? I agree with you. Yeah.
There was, the quarterbacks obviously are the headliners because they're the big names. Larry Fitzgerald is the best player in this draft, I think we can say. And then Jared Allen was also a great player. But besides that, there's a lot of guys that were good. Some of the names like Jason Babin, Chris Cooley, like guys that you remember, but nobody that I would say was like a great player that like a can't miss type guy, not the type of guy that you're like tell your grandkids about kind of guy. So
exactly. Well, outside Larry Fitzgerald, right?
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like aside from the guys that we mentioned, that kind of like the way I see it is like can you tell the story of this NFL era without these guys? And obviously, quarterbacks are kind of they're like the main characters in any show or in the NFL. So you definitely can't tell the story of the NFL without Eli Manning and Ben Roethlisberger, and of course Larry Fitzgerald, even Jared Allen. But some of these other guys, you're like, they were good, but that's it.
They were just
you know what I'm saying?
They were just solid contributors, and they did their job and they played their position really well. But yeah, they weren't any superstars by any means.
And in terms of like Hall of Fame credentials, I mean, Fitzgerald is first ballot. Jared Allen is probably going to get in because you look at the other guys around him and on the sack list, he's probably going to get in at some point.
Yep.
Ben Roethlisberger probably. Phillip Rivers maybe. I don't know. I don't think so. I wouldn't put him up there.
He'll be on the cusp of that conversation, I think.
Yeah, I wouldn't put him in because he doesn't have the rings, but I don't have a vote. But essentially, yeah, I don't. Other than that, I mean, it's 3 in a class, 1 surefire, 3 maybes, so 4. So nothing, not a crazy good draft, but a lot of it was a deep draft with a lot of very good to solid players. So,
yep.
But now our next segment we'll talk about some of the guys that did not survive the redraft and why that might have been. So I'll start with Robert Gallery. I mean, I talked about it at the top. He just wasn't good enough to be an offensive tackle in the NFL. I don't know what it is. I mean, he has all the measurables. He played for Iowa, which is like a gold mine for offensive linemen. For me, it's like I look at the Big Ten. I'm like, that's where I want my offensive lineman from. If you go to Ohio State, you go to Northwestern, you go to Michigan, Wisconsin. If you go to any of those schools, you're probably a good offensive lineman. But it just didn't work out. And, of course, he has to deal with the shame of being picked right before one of the greatest receivers of all time in Larry Fitzgerald. Yeah. But he's also a really nice guy. I met him one time in Oakland. I used to work next door to a tattoo parlor. And this dude pulls up in a huge, I think it was a Ford F-150, like a dually with the 4 wheels in the back.
Damn.
This big ass dude, big long hair, and I'm like, this was in Oakland. I was like, is that who I think it is? And I went up to him, I just said what's up. I didn't like bother him for a picture or anything, but this was in 2009 or 10, so a few years after this. So he hadn't been doing very well, but he was still on the Raiders. So I had to say what's up at least. I actually met Tom Cable at the same place, but
nice, yeah,
nice guy.
I always remember thinking Robert Gallery looked a bit like the Undertaker. So that's
yeah,
what I
man.
About Robert Gallery. That's what I remember.
He looked just like him, and with the long hair and the beard, and he was very intimidating. But just not good enough, and that is what it is. So the next guy is Kellen Winslow. So I believe he's currently in jail.
Yeah, he's been in jail for a while.
Yeah, some kind of assault, some sexual nature or something. But yeah, he clearly has got a few screws loose. But he was good for a little while. He made a Pro Bowl.
Yeah, I think he had like 3-4 years where he was really solid, and then I think he had like some sort of weird knee injury, and then he got a staph infection. Something crazy happened with him, and then he just kind of washed up after that. So
I mean, there was that year where the Browns, they had guys getting staph infections. I think it was him and like Georgia Vicious. But he had a 1,000-yard seasons, a couple 800-yard seasons with the Browns, with Tampa, and then but he always had kind of a screw loose. You remember that big rant he had in the locker room about going to war and all that. It's like
something was definitely wrong with him. He had a few screws loose for sure.
Yeah. So maybe just maybe it's a CTE thing where he really went off the deep end. As a player, but and then right after him was wide receiver Roy Williams. So yeah, what went wrong with him? Why didn't he make your redraft?
Yeah, I mean, he was an okay player, but I think just when you're drafted in the top 10, there's certain expectations. I mean, if he was drafted in the 3rd or 4th round, people are like, okay, yeah, he had a decent career, but he just didn't put up the numbers you expected of a guy from his caliber and his talent level. And so really it was just, I mean, how much of that it was playing with Joey Harrington, we don't know. But you always had high hopes for him every year, and then he always let you down. And I don't even know if he had 1,000-yard receiving in any of his seasons, but maybe
He
one or
had
two.
one. So he had one
Okay,
Pro
yeah.
Bowl season in 06. He had 1,300 yards, 7 touchdowns. So, he was good at that point. But
Yeah.
he never repeated that. And then he got traded to the Cowboys, and he had to deal with all the expectations that came with playing in Dallas. And he's just not very good. So, again, not really his fault. He was catching passes from John Kitna and Joey Harrington in
Yeah.
his career. So, you can't
Can't blame the
he
guy
just
too
fell
much.
short. Yeah. The next guy is Dunta Robinson. I think he was just not very good. He ended up playing for quite a few years. He played for Houston, Atlanta, Kansas City. He had a great rookie season, which was crazy. He had 6 interceptions. He finished second in the Rookie of the Year voting to Jonathan Vilma, and then he just fell off after that. It was the strangest thing. So, and was he even memorable to you? Do you remember anything about this guy?
I just remember his name. I always thought it was like Dante Robinson, and then it was like, no, it's Dunta Robinson. I was like,
Yeah.
that's a strange name, but okay. And then I remember him being like somewhat okay in his rookie year, and then just really falling off a cliff. So that's I don't know. I guess it happens to some guys where they did well their rookie year, and they just for a reason never figured it out after that.
He was definitely one of those guys. The next guy is Lee Evans. He went.
Oh, you missed Reggie Williams.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Reggie Williams. He was picked 9th overall and just didn't do anything. But yeah, what did you think went wrong with Reggie Williams?
I think just having to play for the Jaguars. That's what went wrong for him. I guess he looked the part. He looked like he could be a big time NFL wide receiver. He just never put it together, and playing in Jacksonville probably didn't help him. But I mean, I just don't remember anything about his career. Like there was never it wasn't anything like, oh, Reggie Williams got hurt or something. He has some sort of law issue, or he's on some drugs or anything like that. He just never put it together, and he's just one of those guys that looked the part but just couldn't live up to the part.
Yeah, he absolutely looked the part. He was like 6'4", 230. He looked like, that was the kind of receiver that you wanted in this era of the NFL. He's like the Terrell Owens type.
Exactly.
I think, like you said, he did have to play for the Jaguars, which is unfortunate. And he played for, there's decent quarterbacks, David Garrard, Byron Leftwich, and they were competitive during those years. That was like the Jack Del Rio, where they were always like 9-7, 10-6. They're playing in the same division as Peyton Manning, so I don't think they ever won a division title, but they were always decent. And I think, but they were always like super run heavy, right? It was Fred Taylor, Maurice Jones-Drew. It was not a super creative or explosive offense. And of course, Jack Del Rio is a defensive guy, so that was how he built out his team. So maybe if he ends up on a different team, he does well. Maybe that's something we'll cover in our next wide receiver bus podcast. But yeah, he just did not do much. So the next guy is Lee Evans, who went 13th overall to the Bills out of Wisconsin. I think his biggest problem was he just didn't play with any good quarterbacks. So
yeah, who was his quarterback? J.P. Lossman most of his career.
I believe it was J.P. Lossman, and he had one good season. In Buffalo, he had a 1,200 yard season. Almost 1,300-yard season in 06, and then he had another 1,000-yard season in 08.
Not bad.
So, but aside from that, he was good. He was hovering around 800, 700. So, nothing crazy.
And
but
he was like a speed guy, right? He was known for being a speedy guy. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so. If I remember correctly, yeah, his yards per reception were always like in the 15s. He had a couple 16 yards per reception season. So he was a deep threat type guy. So he's never going to put up crazy reception numbers, but he's definitely like an honorable mention type dude. He definitely not a huge bust or anything. I think he had bad luck playing with bad quarterbacks.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. And then Michael Clayton went 15th overall to Tampa Bay. What happened with him?
just another wide receiver who couldn't figure out the NFL. That's really just what happened to him. I mean, by all accounts, he looked the part. He was, had good hands, all those things. And when he got to the NFL, he just couldn't put it together. I think he had maybe one good season, if I remember correctly.
His rookie year.
His rookie year, right? Yeah, and then
weird.
after that, he fell off. Yeah, it's really weird. Like, some of these guys are really good their rookie years, and then they just fell off. And Michael Clayton happened to be one of those guys.
He had 80 catches for 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns his rookie year.
Wow. I'm surprised he didn't do better after that.
It's really crazy. And then he had more yards his rookie year than he did basically the next 4 years combined.
That's crazy.
But he was in Tampa for 6 years, and then he went to the Giants where he did nothing. But yeah, it's just another one of those strange cases where you're not quite sure what happened with these guys and where it went wrong. But as we know, wide receiver is such a situation-dependent position. Tampa at the time had like a rotating cast of quarterbacks. This was like the John Gruden era when things went bad, So he was starting at one point. I think it was Brian Griese, and then Chris Sims.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Yeah, Chris Sims.
And then I think he had Jeff Garcia at one point, and then Josh Freeman. So just like he had like old Jeff Garcia.
Yeah,
like
old Jeff Garcia. Yeah,
like 37-year-old Jeff Garcia. So maybe it's not his fault, but you expect more from the 15th overall pick. So we'll say that. And then the last pick, Sean Andrews. So I think we covered it. He was good. He was really good for a very short time. He played 60 games in his career, and I think he started less than 40 games in his career. So just injury kind of robbed him of his peak. But that's about it for him. So yeah, all right. Any final thoughts on this draft before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, interesting draft. A lot of good players, but not too many great to, supremely talented players outside of the guys we already talked about. But yeah, it was an interesting draft for sure.
Yeah, and this is memorable draft this is a super memorable draft for me because this is kind of when I really started to pay attention to the NFL. Around this time, I want to say early 2000s. So I do remember all of these players. These are kind of the players of our, not our childhood, but of our teen years. These are the teams that we remember. These, just reading down the list, like, oh yeah, I remember him, and oh, I remember this guy. Just like some names that come out, like Ben Watson, Jabril Wilson, Devery Henderson.
Some of these are fantasy guys too. You're like, oh
yeah,
man,
exactly.
I drafted him in the fantasy draft. Like Ben
and that
Watson,
was the thing. Yeah, that's the thing with a lot of these, in the wide receivers especially. It's a lot of guys that were like, yeah, I remember him. He was, the second or third wide receiver on the scene, like Bernard Berrien. I remember him. He's super skinny, super fast, played for Chicago.
Yeah,
Devery Henderson, balled out a couple years. Michael Jenkins had a couple good years in Atlanta.
Yeah, Michael Turner.
Yeah, Michael Turner. I think he should have been an honorable mention if we didn't mention him already. What's crazy about him is he actually has an All-Pro appearance. He has a first-team All-Pro selection. I
believe it. He had a pretty solid 4 or 5 years.
And he actually has as many first-team All-Pro selections as Larry Fitzgerald.
There you go.
But I mean, he was a backup, right? For a while, he backed up LaDainian Tomlinson, so he's not gonna get a bunch of touches. But dude, in 2008, he has 17
on the Falcons,
yards.
Right?
Yeah, that was his first-team All-Pro season. He had 1,700 yards, and then a couple years later, he had 1,300, and then another 1,300. So,
insane.
Yeah, just a guy that maybe if he gets drafted somewhere else when he's not backing up LaDainian Tomlinson for 4 years, he is he has more of an impact and becomes a star earlier. But yeah, just a lot of cool names that just took me down memory lane as I was reading down the list. Like, yeah, again, oh, I remember him. I remember him too. Remember Isaac Sopoaga?
Yeah, of course.
You remember him.
Of course, I remember him, man. Niner. I think
yeah,
we took
he was
him
like
in the 5th or 6th round or something in this draft.
Yep. He was a 4th round pick, and he was like the precursor to like Vita Vea. And interestingly enough, he is related to Penei Sewell, who is the starting left
I didn't know
tackle
that.
for the Detroit Lions. Yeah.
There you go.
It was a lot of fun. I love
circle.
doing these, man. I love doing these, especially when they're older, because I get to refresh my memory and all these guys, and it's a lot of fun. So, thank you, Salman. Appreciate your time today, man. Thank you all for listening. We appreciate you guys checking us out. Please make sure to follow, like, and subscribe to the 4040 Vision podcast on all the major podcasting platforms. I'm talking all of them: Stitcher, Amazon, Audible, Radio Public, Spotify, of course, Apple Podcasts. So just about wherever you can find your podcast, we made sure to put our podcast there. Google Podcasts, off the top of my head. Make sure to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/4040vision podcast, on Instagram and Twitter at 4040vision pod. We hope to launch a YouTube channel in the coming weeks and months, so keep an eye out for that. So yeah, thanks again, and appreciate your time, Salman.
All right, later, man.